for this panel, we're shifting gears a little bit. So we've talked about a lot of different things, but now kind of leading up to this moment, but we're going to be talking about Silicon Valley and open borders. And within this panel, we're really fortunate to have Jess Lee be a part of it, and also David Maas. Is David... Okay, cool. I see you. All right. Sorry, I wasn't sure. I knew you had something. Yeah. All right. So, so I'm very excited to have this panel happening. I just want to give you guys a really quick kind of overview of who Paul is actually, though, because Paul is going to be moderating. Paul Crider, is a husband and a father living in San Francisco Bay Area. He daylights as a semiconductor engineer, but otherwise likes to spend his time reading and writing. He grew up in Oklahoma before migrating to California for graduate school. Excuse me. So I just want to welcome all of you. Excuse me, I have allergies. And thank you all so much for being a part of this. And also, I just want to mention randomly, David Maas, right? I looked you up on Twitter. I saw you're a troublemaker according to your Twitter, and I like that. So let's hear about your trouble that you've been making. I'm excited. Thank you all so much, and go ahead and go with it for you.
Hi, so this is Paul. I'm introducing our speakers, Jess Lee and Dave Maas. So I believe Jess is speaking first. Jess Lee is an undocumented immigrant and a longtime immigrant rights activist who came to Los Angeles from Korea when she was 12 years old. A community activist turned tech entrepreneur, Jess founded the voter and activist organizing text messaging app Handstack at the age of 26. She's been the CEO of ByteSize, the mass texting app, since 2017. When Jess isn't community organizing or founding new startups, she finds time to read autobiographies, to walk her dog in San Francisco, and to try out new baking recipes. And Jess, I think you can take over from here.
All right, thank you for the intro, Paul. Wow, I never knew I could feel anxious about talking on Zoom, but it is a lot of people in here. And I haven't talked to this many people ever since COVID started. Hi, my name is Jess, and I run a company called ByteSize in San Francisco. And I had been undocumented since I was 12. And when I was 26, I got married, and I now have a green card. But for those 14 years of my life, I had been actually, 28 when I got the green card. So 16 years of my life, I've been undocumented most of my young adult life. And I was really fortunate when Obama came out with deferred action, because that was around the time I was graduating from college. And, otherwise I wasn't going to get a job. I thought I would go work at a restaurant and not be able to put, whatever I had done until that point into use. So I was really happy about that. And building on that, I've been able to start a company in San Francisco. I raised money from investors, I think $1.2 million so far for my company. And it's been really a great accomplishment to be able to do, coming from just having encountered all the things that I have encountered, having been undocumented. And it's interesting to me because in the Silicon Valley, when I've been building my company, I never really was able to share my personal story, in a way that investors understood. I always felt like sharing my undocumented story kind of got people's maybe sympathy or empathy, but never really served as never benefited any of my fundraisers, which was the surprising part. I think at first I was so excited to share my story as an undocumented person, how, I came to start the company, and it just, I don't know, it didn't seem to work for me. But how I got started in all of my journey is I met Dave Benyon when I was like 19. I was going to college in Philadelphia. I went to Bryn Mawr College. That was also a really crazy thing that happened as an undocumented person, because I just didn't qualify for any financial aid, and I applied to 24 colleges and got rejected from pretty much all of them, and I was somehow able to get to Bryn Mawr. Anyway, I met Dave when I was in school, and we started organizing together. Dave was already organizing with other undocumented folks, and the biggest thing we did, I think, is organizing civil disobedience, and we blocked the street in front of ICE to do two things. One is to let other undocumented people know not to be afraid of coming out, and we have to come out to protect each other, and be vocal about what we face day to day. And then another thing was, there was a man who was about to get deported, was detained. He had a wife, U.S. citizen wife, and a kid who was also U.S. citizen, and he was about to get deported, which unfortunately I think he did. So that's, organizing civil disobedience like that. It was really, starting a movement, I think it can be difficult because you have to do so much of one-on-one work, but at the same time, you have to get a lot of people together. So I wanted to make a tool where you can text a lot of people at once, but then start a one-on-one conversation after that. So developed that product after I moved away from Philadelphia. I moved to Buffalo. And eventually that I ended up using that tool for political campaigns. A lot of political campaigns used the texting in 2016. And from there, I started raising money in Silicon Valley to make it and bring it into the commercial world. So now I work with car dealers and other software companies, helping their sales and marketing and product departments. But what's interesting, I think, to me about Silicon Valley is there's so many teams that are outsourced. A lot of engineering teams, they live in India or Russia, and even companies like Uber, they have so many outsourcing teams, and yet, immigration is just such a difficult thing. And we don't treat people equally, even if they're contributing in a significant way. And even for myself, I've hired more than 20 people throughout my company. And I think that starting a company is an interesting way for undocumented people to support themselves, and also have a way to hire other people because it gives you that corporate entity. Myself, I've been able to hire people through the companies that they created. So even if they're undocumented, if they have a company, I'm able to have a contract with that company and use their services. But yeah, I don't think it's an issue that's been solved. I was only able to get green card through marriage, and I have siblings who have DACA. They're always, not sure what's going to happen to them. One of them works at Facebook, and my brother's still a student, but it's, there's so many young, talented people out there that their future's so uncertain because of their status. And I don't think it's helping anyone to put them in that position. So those are some of my perspectives. There's so much to say, but if I'd like to take any questions if there's any undocumented folks out there who are thinking about starting their own business, or maybe you're just curious about how I started my own business and supported myself. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Jess. I have a quick question before I think we will, I'll introduce Dave and we'll take questions for both of you, for both of your presentations after his. But I have a quick question for you. Have you found that immigrants within your own company, either one of them, since you've led two companies, have you found any way of sheltering them from surveillance or from, I don't know if you've ever dealt with immigration raids or anything like that?
So that's a really good question. My company has been mostly remote, so people are working on their laptops, and we had an office in San Francisco before COVID, and now we're just fully remote. Never really encountered the immigration raid, fortunately. But in terms of being able to give an opportunity to, support themselves and make money, definitely. There's many ways to do that, but yeah, I haven't come across a raid at my company personally. Yeah.
Okay. I see one question, but I'm going to hold off on that, I think, and I'm going to introduce Dave Maas. So Dave Maas is the Senior Investigative Researcher for the Electronic Frontier Foundation. He covers police surveillance, prisoner rights, and public records transparency. Dave's award-winning investigative reporting has revealed corruption in local governments or governments of all levels, I think, and human rights abuses in refugee camps. Dave cosplays digital rights at comic conventions. I'm not sure exactly how one does that, but maybe he can explain. And Dave has even had a holiday named after him by the San Diego City Council. Dave Maas Day is a special day for annoying politicians and filing records requests. So Dave, I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for the introduction. So I think what I'm going to talk about today is the polar opposite of what Jess is talking about. So Jess has a lot of like positive stuff and about her own life. I'm going to be talking about the sort of darker side of things and giving you a primer, so to speak, on all the technologies we're seeing along the US-Mexico border, some of which are going to be directly tied to Silicon Valley, but even those that aren't, you should think of them as this is kind of the market that a lot of tech companies are looking at. There is this huge market to send technology to the border. But I put together a bunch of slides to just sort of get everybody on the same page on the massive amount of surveillance that we're seeing along the US-Mexico border. So I'm just going to make sure my screen sharing works here okay. And hopefully, all right, I think everybody's seeing it. So I'm going to just keep moving and people let me know if it breaks. But again, my name is Dave Maas. I'm a senior investigative researcher at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. I have been doing work with the Reynolds School of Journalism at the University of Nevada, Reno, where we're working on a project called the Atlas of Surveillance, where we are gathering what we call open source intelligence, news articles, public records, meeting minutes, press releases, anything that we can find on the internet to document what police departments what sheriff's departments, what other government agencies have which technologies around the country, around the United States. And we started this project with a pilot focusing specifically on the 23 counties along the US-Mexico border. So we were looking at 4 states, California, New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas, obviously. We had 86 students who were just scouring the internet looking for any kind of report or documentation of something in use by local police or something in use by Customs and Border Protection. We were really trying to build out a data set. And if you want to check it out, it's at EFF.org/atlas-border. But really, I'm just going to dump a whole bunch of stuff on you right now. So we also have an interactive map, I should say, that actually allows you to see where all of these things and how they're placed along the US-Mexico border. And you can see that it is pretty consistent along the way. There are, even where the population is pretty light, you do see a lot of technologies popping up. And we also have a way for you to download the data or sort it or play with it to get a sense.
Averiguar como
so there's ways for you to sort through it.
hay maneras para que puedan averiguar cómo usarlo.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. It seems like there's an issue with the interpretation, and that's why they're breaking through. Let me see if I can just manage. Okay, yes, I see one of the interpreters has just rejoined. Let me see if I can re-grant them access. If you pause just one moment, we'll get them ready to go. Okay. Okay, you can begin speaking again and just make sure that we can't hear you.
Perfect.
Okay.
So hopefully everything's okay.
Yes, we're set.
Perfect. Okay, so let's start. I've broken down this presentation into kind of categories of technology, of where you might see them or what they might be documenting. And we're going to start first with the kind of technology that police carry on their persons. So these are going to be body-worn cameras. You see here, these are the Tombstone marshals. They like to use the term marshals because of the OK Corral and all the history that goes with it. But you can see that just based on their uniform, they've got so much technology all over the place. Those little cameras in the center, they're kind of square with a little lens on the upper right-hand side. Those are your stereotypical Axon cameras. Axon also makes the taser, but Axon is actually this huge tech company that's moving into license plate readers, that's moving into drones, that's moving into virtual reality. It's becoming a huge market, and these body-worn cameras are their into all of law enforcement, but also specifically around the border. Sometimes these cameras aren't so obvious. Here's a camera that you would see in Laredo. So the Laredo Police Department actually semi-conceals their cameras. They're hidden in their vests. They're very small, and you wouldn't even know they were there unless you were looking for them. We also see law enforcement starting to use mobile face recognition devices. So here, in our research, we found that there were more than 30 agencies in San Diego County that had been given these mobile phones that are kind of souped up Android devices meant to take a photo of somebody and bounce it off a database. And it wasn't just like the San Diego Sheriff and the El Cajon Police Department. ICE was given these devices. Customs and Border Protection was given these devices. The U.S. Marshals were given these devices. The one positive thing I can say about this is even though they were doing this for about 7 years or so, as of January 1st, this program was shut down due to a new state law in California that has instituted a 3-year moratorium on mobile biometric tech. But that's not the only mobile face recognition we've seen along the border. This is a pair of glasses called OD Tactical Eyewear. If you look right between the bridge, there is a little lens, and that lens is taking photos and actually streaming them to a server, and it does live face recognition of people you meet. Now, the Doña Ana County Sheriff's Office in New Mexico was almost close, like they had filed all of the paperwork to buy this technology, had gotten almost to the end, and then there was an election and the sheriff changed, and the new sheriff came in and apparently shut this whole program down. This would have been one of the first times in the country we would have seen face-mounted face recognition, and I don't think it's a coincidence that this came up along the border first. We're also seeing along the border sheriff's departments instituting iris technology scanning in their jails. So it's like face recognition, but it's for your eyes. And they use this as they're arresting, detainees or immigrants or whoever they're bringing into custody, taking pictures of their eyes so they have that on record. And you'll find that in Doña Ana County as well, but also in Texas in places like Cameron County, Hidalgo County, and El Paso County. But the plan is to spread this across all of the Texas border counties. So I'm going to move on to tech that you might see on the roads, either monitoring the roads or installed on streets. Automated license plate readers. This is a technology I spent a lot of time on. These are cameras that look for license plates. And when it sees a license plate of the vehicle, it will take a picture, it will convert them into letters and numbers and upload it to a database. And that allows law enforcement and immigration enforcement to put in a license plate into their database to see all of the places that car has been seen over a period of time, or they can use it to create watch lists for people that they're going to visit. That they are create watch lists of people they want to apprehend. And we found that as in 2019, more than 40 agencies along the border were deploying these license plate readers. And since all of them share data together, what this means is that a law enforcement agency can actually track somebody driving from one end to the other end of the border. They can also use this data to create algorithms that flag people who are driving unusual routes. And we certainly have seen federal agencies set up these license plate readers, and when they see somebody taking a back road or an unusual path that might go around a border checkpoint, they will then pull them over. Camera networks. I think back in the day, you might have thought when you see a surveillance camera that it's just going to some VHS, VHS recorder somewhere, or maybe it's streaming to some back room and there's just some guard watching it. That's not how cameras are these days. Lots of cities are installing camera networks that are able to stream live. They have cameras that you can control with remote control, and you can zoom in or pan all the way around. And we're seeing those throughout the border region. So in Calexico, in Brownsville, and McAllen. But I want to highlight Laredo, Texas, because they started installing these around the city. And they actually are feeding into something called the Laredo Real-Time Crime Center. This is this very sophisticated technological headquarters where you have a whole bunch of analysts sitting at workstations, and they're able to access any camera in the city in real time. And they're also able to access other kinds of data systems, whether it might be, at these real-time crime centers across the country, we see license plate readers, some gunshot detection devices, we'll see predictive policing, we'll see all sorts of databases feeding into these centers. One other thing that we saw on the road that was very interesting in Arizona. So we saw this in the Arizona Department.
Do you mind slowing down a little bit? Sorry, the interpreter is having a hard time. Do you mind slowing down? Thank you.
Absolutely. I can certainly slow down a little bit. I'm a little bit of a fast talker, mostly because I get very excited about all the information out there related to this. So one of the other technologies that we found surprising is something called Star Chase. This was purchased by the Arizona Department of Public Safety, and some of the units were transferred to local law enforcement, particularly in Cochise County, Arizona. These are a very Batman-like technology. It essentially attaches an air gun to the front of a police car, and if the police car gets behind another vehicle, it can shoot a GPS tracker out, and it will stick to another car, and then they can track the movements of that vehicle. And this is something that as far as we know, is still in use in Arizona. We actually have seen this in California as well. Okay, so I want to talk about tech on the land. So tech that may not necessarily be in the city, but may be installed on ranch land or on some of the tribal land, or even just by the side of the road as you're driving across the border or driving along the border. This is a document that comes from on the left is a document that comes from the Government Accountability Office outlining a lot of the technologies that are part of the Customs and Border Protection Southwest Border Technology Plan. A lot of these are going to be towers with varying capabilities. That could be thermal imaging, it could be radar, it could be long distance video, but you can see there's at least 4 different towers here that they're using, some of which are mobile and part of vehicles and can be moved around. I also want to call your attention to one that's in the top level here called an unattended ground sensor. These are sensors that are actually put on the ground to try to monitor people crossing the border. And then on the right, this is one of the primary exhibits of Silicon Valley's interaction with border tech. These are Anduril Sentry Towers. These were created by a company called Anduril that is, it's one of the Peter Thiel companies, one of the Palmer Luckey companies. Palmer Luckey had done had invented the Oculus Rift and has since moved into border tech. And we're seeing these starting to be piloted in the San Diego area as well as the El Paso area. But it's not just Customs and Border Protection. We're seeing the same technology used by Customs and Border Protection trickling down to local law enforcement. So all of these are different kinds of mobile surveillance towers in use by agencies along the US-Mexico border. I think in Texas, if you will see all of these in Texas. These are all being used by often sheriffs in counties neighboring the border. We're also seeing ground sensors and wildlife cameras being deployed around the border region, particularly in Texas and Arizona. So let me tell you about Operation Drawbridge. As you can see across the top, Operation Drawbridge is an effort both by federal immigration officials, but also Texas, Texas local law enforcement, and even the Army National Guard is involved in this. But basically what they've done is they've installed cameras in a lot of places along the Rio Grande Valley. And these cameras are motion detection cameras. These were originally designed to capture wildlife that are showing up at oases or, trying to find endangered species. But now they're out in the middle of the desert. And so when they detect a motion, that camera captures an image, transmits that image to the Department of Public Safety, which then transmits it to a bunch of different intelligence hubs, very similar to those real-time crime centers, but not operated by local police. And then that kind of bounces the information around until they can dispatch U.S. Border Patrol agents to apprehend people. And you can see on the right some examples of what those images look like. In Arizona, along the San Pedro River Valley, which is highlighted in red here, in Arizona, the Cochise County Sheriff has installed also wildlife cameras. These are called Buckeye cameras, and again, it's the same thing. When they are triggered by motion, they take photographs and then they transmit those photographs to law enforcement, who then dispatches officers to apprehend people crossing the border. I'm going to move on to tech in the air. So the things that are capturing footage of us from above. And I think most people, when they think of this, are thinking about the Predator drone, these drones that U.S. and Customs and Border Protection purchased about a decade ago. These have definitely captured the popular imagination when it comes to the border. And certainly, over, I think it was a 5-year period, there was nearly 20,000 flight hours over the southwestern border. That is, they don't only fly there, but that is primarily where they fly. But that's not the only kind of aerial surveillance we're dealing with at the border. A lot of it is also coming from local law enforcement. But before I get to that, I also want to tell you, if you haven't seen one of these, I often say that people, along the border often live in the shadow of surveillance. And these devices called aerostats definitely create the largest shadow in a very literal sense, because you can see how big these things are. And you would see these from the road even. But these are called aerostats, and they are surveillance blimps. This is how they work. They usually have them attached to some sort of command center. They go up high in the air, and then they have video cameras that are able to see in all directions. And they will feed video back to the command center, which will then dispatch Border Patrol officers to intersect with people who might be crossing the border. And this is something they actually use quite a lot. According to the Government Accountability Office, between 2014 and 2016, there were almost 50,000 apprehension events. And an apprehension event is when Customs and Border Protection actually does apprehend somebody attempting to cross the border. And this map shows you where they are located. You can see that they are very concentrated in South Texas, but you do have one in New Mexico, and you do have one in Arizona, as well as one in Puerto Rico and Florida. The Texas Department of Public Safety also has a couple of surveillance planes that it will fly across the state. This is from an investigation from the Texas Observer showing how these planes, which are based out of San Antonio, fly across the state. And over a 2-year period between 2015 and 2017, sorry, a 1.5-year period between 2015 and 2017, 2 particular towns in Starr County had the most flights per zip code of any place in the state. Over that period, the spy plane flew over Rio Grande City 357 times. And there's less than 15,000 inhabitants in that city. We also have the small drones. So a lot of the departments, at least 20 along the US-Mexico border, had purchased these small unmanned aerial systems or drones. And Chula Vista in San Diego County, which is one of these fairly large bordering cities, actually has one of the most cutting-edge drone programs in the country, where they have decided to buy a whole bunch of these drones and install them every 1.5 miles so they can cover the entire city in drone surveillance. So I'm going to just sort of wrap up with a few more points here. One thing to think about when it comes to surveillance along the border is where the money is coming from. Quite a bit of this money is coming from the federal government, and of that, a lot of it is coming from a program called Operation Stone Garden. And Stone Garden provides funds to local agencies in exchange for those agencies participating in border security measures. So much of the technology I've just went over was funded by Operation Stone Garden. So license plate readers in Yuma and Laredo and Marana in Pima County, Arizona, Hidalgo and Edinburgh and Farr all bought those surveillance trailers with this money. Webb County has installed surveillance towers all along the border. And those Star Chase GPS trackers, the ones that are like Batman cannons, also paid for with Operation Stone Garden funds. I also want to highlight, where a lot of these decisions are made. Like, how do police find out about these technologies? Well, there's a lot of police conferences, but there's one in particular that's worth noting called the Border Security Expo, which happens in Texas every year. It happened in April of this year, and it was not canceled because of COVID. It was one of the few conferences that went on despite COVID. And as you can see here, they're still planning to have it in April of next year. And this is an event where they get to, police and, federal officers come, and they're, shown all the new technologies. And then they even get to go in the field and play with the new technologies, ranging from what's here, a giant drone, to a gun, a radio gun that can take out a drone, to actually all of the armaments that are being purchased by these agencies. And then I just want to end with a little bit of a plug for our overall Atlas of Surveillance project. We have compiled more than 6,200 data points around the country, all 50 states, all of the districts like Puerto Rico and even the Virgin Islands. You can just put in where you live and see what kind of technology is available there. We have a database that you can actually see what is available in any county, and you can remix it and make your own projects. And we also have a map if that's how you prefer to view these results. And that is what I've got in terms of slides.
Great, thanks, Dave. I have a quick question before. I know there are a couple of questions for Jess in the Q&A. My question's a bit philosophical about body-worn cameras. When body-worn cameras first started coming out in domestic policing, the whole idea was that that would protect people, because there would be, evidence. There would be camera evidence of the interactions between police and citizens. You present body-worn cameras in a very negative light. Does that rest entirely on the difference between a citizen who has presumptive rights and immigrants who don't have those presumptive rights? Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, so with body-worn cameras, they did come into popularity during the Obama administration with a lot of funding from the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice funded something like 500 different police departments around the country to purchase body-worn cameras. And then there were state grants that further pushed that down. And the idea was, yes, let's get this in. There'll be more accountability. Maybe we'll prevent more police violence. I am hard pressed to think over the last few years where one in one case where body-worn camera footage of a police beating or a police homicide was actually what made it public and resulted in accountability. Most of the time, it's still cell phones by private citizens. But what we do see with body-worn cameras is that it's frequently used to gather evidence. In fact, that's the primary use, is to gather evidence. You look at Flagstaff, Arizona, where there was protest, like everywhere else in the country, there were Black Lives Matter protests, but no one was arrested there, except for 3 weeks later when police reviewed the body-worn camera footage and then documented who was captured on the body-worn camera footage, and then they arrested them. So I think that it's backfired to a large extent. I think the only times I can think of where it's been helpful is there have been a few really dumb cops who have either been caught saying racist things when the camera was going, or were caught planting evidence when the camera was going. And that's more to their own like stupidity rather than any major accountability like thing with the cameras themselves. That said, I think that it's a different calculation when we're talking about detention facilities, or when we're talking, we're talking about an immigration detention center, or we're talking about a jail. You might want to make a different calculation, for guards wearing body-worn cameras versus, day-to-day police. And then when you add face recognition to them, then you're essentially, taking this idea of demanding papers from someone, but you don't have to demand their papers. You're taking their papers from them by grabbing their face and running it off your criminal justice database.
Thanks. That's a really informative answer. Let's see. So I'm going to ask some questions that have been written here for Jess. The first question is, how did you reach corporations with your product? Because your product in both of your companies, I think, have been, directed toward organizations and corporations?
I'm happy to answer that. I'm guessing this is maybe oriented towards like sales, like how did I sell my product to companies?
I'm not sure.
That's right, Paul?
I'm not sure. The same person, Arlene Grant, has a follow-up question, which is about avoiding status issues with corporations.
Okay.
So, and
cool.
she represents immigrants in a similar position.
Awesome. So so my immigration status didn't matter in terms of being able to sell technology or product to companies. In that way, it's kind of funny, like you have more rights as a company than an undocumented immigrant. But it's something that you can leverage if you are an undocumented person. And how I sold it, I think initially I didn't sell it. I gave it out to nonprofits to use. And then one day I applied for investor fund, and I think it was like $20,000 to start funding my product development. And with that, I was sitting in the office of that investor, and someone who's working with the mayor's office in San Francisco came by, and they were interested in using text messaging to get the votes out from, I think, Chinese population who speak Cantonese. So the first text message was in Cantonese, like 50,000 people. So it was, I think in the beginning, you want to do everything and anything you can to get the word out. Talk to as many people as possible that you can, and don't be afraid of asking for introductions, taking meetings that might not seem, like a sales meeting to you. I think my initial sales was made to people that I didn't know before, that I met through a friend of a friend of a friend. But eventually it started building a sales funnel of using email and phone calls to get outbound sales going, and then using marketing on LinkedIn and Facebook and blogging to get web traffic coming to my site. In terms of avoiding my status issues, I registered for an ITIN, and then I created a C corporation. So I think you can do that even if you're undocumented. So that was a huge win, because through that company I could do a lot of things. So even if you don't create a C Corp, I think you can create an LLC if you're not raising money from investors, and you can use the ITIN and you can apply for that. And I think some people create a EIN, with that, and then use that to secure business from really any type of other businesses. I hope that helps.
Great, thank you. I need a little bit of help from a translator for a couple of questions from Carmen Guerrero.
Yes, I can read the questions for you.
I'm so sorry. I don't mean to interrupt. Sorry. Can you all slow down a little bit? Is that possible? I'm sorry. Thank you very much. I missed the text asking that. I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamila. So the questions are, first, congratulations on all your successes. Have you thought of a solution to the immigration problem for young people who, like you, live undocumented? What is the fear of this country against migrants? To design all of this technology against the victims of this neoliberal system.
I guess is the first question maybe for me, and then the second for Dave. I can get the first one. Yeah.
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
The first one is for Jessica, and I believe the second one is for Dave.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Immigration is such a tough nut to crack, and I was thinking while I was listening to Dave's presentation and feeling like, how are we going to fight against all these forces? But there are interesting ideas out there. For example, I saw a company that helps people get jobs in tech industry and get a visa, make it easy to get a visa for that. Obviously, that doesn't solve current undocumented immigrants' problems, but I think that for me, it's been more about giving opportunities to people who have DACA and being flexible and working with companies, through companies with immigrants. So that's been one way. If I have an idea on how to solve immigration with technology, then maybe we can come up with one all together.
Great. Dave?
Yeah, so if it's okay, I'm gonna try to answer that question along with the one that just came in from anonymous attendee, because I think it addresses, my thoughts address both. So I think that anonymous attendee had asked, it seems that the border becomes a site to try out new surveillance technologies before they are used more broadly throughout. So I would say that the thing about the way our system looks at immigrants is that they are not necessarily able to speak up for themselves. They don't have as much power here. And so they're easy to scapegoat. And that has been true in the United States since there were immigrants in the United States. That you just identify who has less power than you, and then you try out whatever you want to try out on them. Particularly around the US border, there are two reasons this encourages early adoption or early experimentation with technology. And the first of all, is that there's this idea that within like 100 miles of the US border, the normal constitutional protections we have don't apply because it's close to our entry-exit point with another country. That's sort of the first element. Then the second element is that when we're dealing with people who are non-US citizens, they also have reduced rights. So you take those two like issues where people's rights are reduced, and you've created this test market, this testing zone for a lot of different technologies. Now, having looked at police technology, both near the border and outside the border, I am convinced that not everybody was going to be convinced of this, but I'm convinced that so much of this is coming from salespeople, from companies who are looking to make money and not necessarily putting public safety or national security, whatever they're going to claim, if it's homeland security or public safety, whatever, that isn't the primary concern. Making money is the primary concern for a lot of these companies. And so they need to generate a market. They need to create a need that isn't there to begin with.
Thanks. There was a question from Olivia Henry. How do people's personal online presence, as in social media, feed into the data that both police and ICE have access to?
So this one is a real difficult to answer in like real time. Whenever we're dealing with the US government, we're always on like a year to 5 year lapse. Like we are not going to find out all of the weird stuff and the underhanded stuff that the Trump administration has gotten up to until perhaps the end of the Biden administration. It takes that long sometimes. They might post some rules about how they want to gather more social media data from people entering the country or people applying for visas. And you see that a lot with the Secretary of State, the State Department, and as well as Department of Homeland Security. But what I will say is that I am concerned about how much they're looking at social media. I'm concerned about how much data they might be purchasing from data brokers who are taking stuff from our apps. But one of the things that really jumps out at me in terms of like highlighting how underhanded the federal government can be with social media is there was a case a couple of years ago where in order to try to entrap students, foreign students and entrap them for staying beyond their visa, they had created a fake university, encouraged these students to sign up for this fake university when one of the primary ways of establishing the credibility of this fake university was creating an entire social media ecosystem for it, a Facebook page for it, Facebook accounts for all of the fake employees of it, friending all of these like students and then using that network to identify other students to recruit. So I definitely think that social media is something that is a huge part of how police and ICE are surveilling people.
Question from Sophia Optikar for Dave. I noticed that the drones in your example were associated with firehouses. What have you found in terms of the involvement of firefighters in surveillance?
That's also really interesting. So in our Atlas of Surveillance project, we do not include drones owned by fire departments. Bard College, which compiled the data set that we draw from, the primary data set, does include fire departments in its research. And so if you go to Bard College Center for the Study of the Drone, you can actually see the correlation between the two. I do feel that the fire departments will share their technology with law enforcement when law enforcement asks for it, but I'm really reluctant to be too critical of fire departments for what they're doing. I live in California. We are constantly in fire country. We have not just firefighters out there. We have actual prisoners out there risking their lives to save people. And I'm sympathetic to the idea of using a drone for the limited purpose of getting aerial footage of moving fires. But that said, once you give a technology to a government, there's not necessarily easy to keep other branches of the government from getting a hold of it.
I think this question is for both of you. Are there future technologies, apps, et cetera, that we can consider that can assist people in movement across borders to keep them safe. This questionnaire is thinking about those who are currently in periphery cities toward the border, contact for loved ones, perhaps even temporary work or realms to receive donations, etc. Jess, do you want to answer this one first?
Sure. It's a great question. Yeah, I do think there's a lot of temp work that is possible now because of apps. It's kind of a both side, because I think a lot of some people think those temp work is unfair, you know, because you don't get any benefits and etc. But it does allow a lot of undocumented immigrants who might be moving to support themselves. Yeah, I know there's a donation platforms, but nothing that's especially for immigrants. I wonder if there's anyone who use like GoFundMe to support themselves. I'm sure there must be someone. But yeah, I think this is totally possible. I think the biggest thing that I see is, how do you make sure those people know to use those, and does it even make sense for them, and while they're hurrying through different places. So yeah, I would have to really interview a lot of people who have been through that situation and ask, well, what would have helped.
I'm going to try to remember to speak slowly. I know I'm not doing a very good job of it, but to me, the thing that immediately comes to mind is encryption, the technology that makes sure the things that we're sending to each other, the text messages, the emails, are unreadable to anybody other than the intended recipient. The federal government, and not just in the United States, but in other countries, see encryption as a threat, and they want to undermine the ability for us to do that. And I feel like being able to use encrypted communication, whether that is Signal, the app Signal, or even just Facebook Messenger, the ability to have an encrypted device like the iPhone that people cannot open without my password is super important, particularly to people who are going to have to cross the border on a regular basis. I think the next question is kind of similar about technology to do good rather than increase surveillance. To be honest, the thing that comes to mind for me is that natural language translating systems are becoming amazing. The ability to translate something that, a language that you've never spoken before is becoming huge. It's just a matter of like how you execute that technology, so that if I am, using a device to hear what you say and have it translated to me, that it's not bouncing off the government or bouncing off someplace where other entities might be able to get it. But I'm very interested in that, in the growth of real-time translation technology.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Oh yeah, and thinking about this, I think technology for good perhaps mainly focuses on amplifying somebody's voice. So whether it's making it easy to organize a group of people or get your story out there, I feel that maybe we won't be able to fight against like a drone directly. I don't know, should we build our own drone that just like takes those drones down? But I think, sharing your stories and sharing what happened and raising other people's voice is always something that helps give pressure to government agencies.
We have one last question so far. Oh no, we have a couple more. I'm sorry. Is there a way we can create a moral compass for tech industries? And I guess these are a lot of different kind of tech industries. Maybe surveillance industries that Dave talked about, which would help them create tech for good rather than for enforcement. Is there any way of doing that through regulation or through the power of persuasion?
So we've seen a lot. We've seen the tech worker community really rise up since the beginning of the Trump administration and use their internal power as workers to influence the executive branch of their company to do better on a variety of issues, including whether they work with immigration enforcement or not. Generally, one of the things that we recommend for any company is to take a know your customer approach. So before they're going to contract with somebody like ICE, to evaluate whether, first of all, whether the government entity they're partnering with has a history of human rights abuses. And if it has a history of human rights abuses, then maybe don't do business with them. But then also imagine what could be done with your technology. If you're giving it over to it, is it likely they're going to use your technology to do human rights abuses? That's something that maybe you should avoid as well. But yeah, it can be very hard because there is often so much profit involved in it that people will turn a blind eye, or they just don't even want to think about the repercussions of the technology. They say, well, this is just for file management, but file management down the road turns into imprisonment.
We have one last question. Do you have any advice for how to deal with border agents who demand that you unlock your phone?
Yes, but I think the best thing for me to do is just post a link to chat on that, if that's okay. So we have an actual hold guide as well as a thing that you can print out to carry with you to give you some things to say and how to make the decisions to know what your rights are. So if I could just post that, that probably is going to be the best way to get across it in what I think is I think we have 30 seconds left.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, if there are no other questions, I think we can turn it over to Jamila.
All right, thanks so much. That was an amazing, it was an amazing and also horrifying panel. I actually study fusion centers, and I care a lot about surveillance. It's kind of what I do now. So I am grateful. I'm also from Texas, Dave. So everything you said, I was like, yep. I remember going through a checkpoint, in all of those things. So I'm sure a lot of people in this room have experienced that. So I'm glad you brought it to light, because I think often in the North, we don't really realize that these things are real, even though we live within constitutional free zones, as you spoke up about before. So thank you for bringing that up. And also all that you brought, Jess, was amazing. I'm sorry, Jessica was amazing. Thank you so much for that insight. Everyone, just so you know, their information is posted on our Twitter. So if you want to get a hold of them via Twitter or follow them, you can go in there and find it. But we're going to go ahead and close up for now and then come back in a little bit. We're going to take a 15-minute break. And Nandita Sharma is going to do I'm calling it a party. You guys can call it whatever you want. I feel like it should be a party at this point. We've been here all day. So we're going to be having the Nandita Sharma book club party, book discussion, but it's on Home Rule, or her new book, Home Rule, National Sovereignty and the Separation of Natives and